Welcome to the Explainer. All right, today we're jumping straight into a pretty wild geopolitical what-if. It's a kind of scenario that genuinely sounds like the plot of a political thriller, but as you'll see, it carries some terrifying real-world weight. We are looking at one of Europe's absolute oldest territorial disputes and breaking down exactly what would happen if it suddenly shattered the peace.
Seriously, what if Spain actually invaded Gibraltar tonight? What if this historic, kind of simmering dispute just exploded into a full-blown, modern international emergency? Today we're going to see how a tiny, strategically priceless piece of rock could literally ignite a global storm.
Picture this for a second. The lights flickering over the Strait of Gibraltar just after sunset, the sea darkening into this silent sheet of black water, and somewhere in that narrow passage, a crisis begins. It happens so suddenly that before the very first breaking news alert even chimes on your phone, the world has irrevocably changed.
Part 1. Why Gibraltar Matters. The Strategic Rock.
So, to get our bearings, Gibraltar is a British overseas territory. It's geographically tiny, right? But it sits smack at the mouth of the Mediterranean, which means it controls one of the most vital maritime choke points on the entire planet. If Spain truly invaded, we're not just talking about a localized border skirmish. No way. This would be a direct, explosive challenge to the whole post-war international order.
Moving on to Part 2, the first hours of crisis, chaos and confusion.
The sheer speed of this would be absolutely staggering. We're talking minutes before rumors completely outpace official statements, as military aircraft get tracked on radar. In the short term, the streets of Gibraltar would just flood with urgent movement. Local forces would have to scramble immediately to protect civilians and lock down critical infrastructure. And pretty much instantly, the alert hits London, throwing the Prime Minister and defense officials straight into a secure crisis room.
And inside that room, there's really just one massive, terrifying question they'd be desperately trying to answer. Is this just a limited incident, or is it the opening move of a much, much larger war? Because honestly, the answer to that question determines everything that happens next.
You have to understand, the pressure on Britain to react here would be off the charts. Losing an overseas territory by force is a complete symbolic catastrophe. So, step 1, they launch emergency diplomacy. Step 2, the Royal Navy and the RAF have to rapidly shift into an urgent defensive posture. And step 3, which is probably the most crucial, they coordinate immediately with global allies. Because a crisis of this scale, it definitely doesn't stay just between two countries for long.
Part 3. Domestic and economic shockwaves. The bilateral fallout.
Okay, looking at the UK side first. No government could just ignore a military attack. You'd see intense public outrage and Parliament demanding immediate deterrence. But then look at Spain. Even if certain factions supported the move, this would be a massive self-inflicted wound. Spain is deeply, deeply tied to international institutions. So impartially speaking, we'd see instant domestic protest there, severe political isolation, and absolute panic rippling through their business and tourism sectors.
And the global markets? Yeah, the reaction there would be instant. We're talking surging insurance premiums right out of the gate. Shipping routes would become entirely unpredictable. We'd see severe energy delays and absolutely skyrocketing costs for maritime traffic. Just the mere possibility of conflict in the strait is enough to send shockwaves through global finance and logistics.
There's a quote from the source material that really hits the nail on the head here. It says, "The global economy does not wait for wars to fully break out before it reacts. It prices risk the moment risk becomes believable." And that is so true. The second those forces start moving, the global economy takes a massive hit. Part 4. The NATO and Global Nightmare. Allies divided. Think about this for a second. NATO was built to deter external enemies, right? It was absolutely not built to break up direct conflicts between its own allies. Britain and Spain are both major players in the very alliance structure that has kept Europe stable for generations. This scenario would just completely tear at the core credibility of collective security.
So globally, we're talking full-blown panic mode. Washington would be working overtime to prevent a wider rupture within NATO. Because a self-inflicted crisis on Europe's edge is literally the last thing they want. Meanwhile, the United Nations instantly convenes emergency discussions, scrambling ambassadors to try and freeze the conflict. And the European Union? They'd be desperately attempting to manage an unprecedented internal crisis involving one of their largest member states. But hey, diplomacy is just one piece of the puzzle. The narrative warfare kicks off instantly. You've got breaking TV coverage blanketing the globe. The internet just explodes with these intense debates over history and international law, all fueled by a rapid spread of misinformation. Both sides would be frantically battling for public opinion, trying to justify their optics to a watching world.
Part 5. The long-term fallout. Occupation and reality.
Because here's the thing. Even if an invasion actually succeeded on day one, holding that territory, that is an entirely different nightmare. Taking a compact, incredibly civilian-dense area means you're going to face extreme civilian fear, fierce local resistance, and massive civil disobedience. Long-term, it guarantees prolonged diplomatic isolation. A military might be able to control the ground, sure, but without international legitimacy, the whole thing is completely unsustainable.
Like the sources point out, every single day of occupation would just become this fresh, gaping diplomatic wound. Try to imagine the psychological toll on the civilians trapped in that compact territory. Every barricade, every patrol feels terrifyingly close. Everyday normality just vanishes overnight.
So why should the rest of us even care? Well, because the UK's response wouldn't just be about a piece of land. It's about defending the fundamental principle of sovereignty. The whole international order basically depends on the idea that disputes are negotiated, not just seized by military force. If that core principle collapses in Gibraltar, then literally every unresolved territorial issue globally becomes a ticking time bomb.
So it really makes you wonder, just how thin is the line between stability and total crisis? It's a stark reminder that these old disputes, they never truly disappear, do they? They just kind of wait for the wrong moment to wake up. And a crisis doesn't actually need to be geographically huge to be explosive. Sometimes it just takes one tiny place, one symbolic move, to shatter the world as we know it. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer of the source material today. And remember to keep questioning the balance of our global order.